At the end of the story told the other day, it was suggested that when there is an object of desire, we call it love. And when there is no longer an object of desire, there is a longing for something, maybe liberation or peace or nirvana. But then, when we have no longer the illusion that there is something to long for, we become a supernova that implodes into itself to become a black hole. And we know the nature and power of a black hole is to consume whatever comes into its aegis. So the question that arises out of this suggestion is, what is this power? A power that has impetus and impels us along, and becomes the power that of a black hole, we can state, that is so great that nothing can resist it. And you know, this is the way of stories. So exploring the possibility of finding the answer to this question for ourselves, there are several old stories. The ingredients, the elements, the chemistries to put into our pot. The first is that story about the prince who played out all of the desires of the world in the palace, and came to a place where there was no longer any taste for these and the opulence that surrounded him and satiated him day after day. So he decided to go on a quest to seek that something, that nirvana that had been spoken of, enlightenment. So he donned the garbs of an ascetic, and he went off into the deep forest to contemplate. But, as is the way with life, he had the need to go out into the world every so often, to go into town, to take his begging bowl, to receive the alms that were given to monks, those who were considered to be ascetics and seekers. But of course our prince was young and handsome, and even with his shaven head and his monk's robes, his very presence was felt, and particularly so by the daughter of the local grocer, who fell in love with him. Every day when he came into town, she stood with longing and tried as best she could to be close to him. And her love became so great, her longing became so great, she told her parents that if she could not have this monk, if she could not be one with him, she would kill herself. And of course, being an only daughter, her parents wanted to do whatever they could. So they sought out our monk, telling him of the situation, beseeching him, please, please help us. And as it happened, a wave of something greater far greater than his longing for liberation, freedom, washed over him, and he said, "Yes, I will marry your daughter." And so it transpired that they were wed, and he became the most devoted of husbands. He and his wife became basket weavers, weaving baskets to make a living for them. And it was found that whoever purchased those baskets received blessings. Their lives became more harmonious. And it was noticed, whoever came to purchase those baskets and came into the presence of the once monk and now devoted husband, found him weaving his baskets, his lips moving in that which could not be heard, but being totally and absolutely attentive to whoever came to purchase their wares. What is this power? And then there's another strange Siddha story about the man who was a weaver. He'd made a successful life as a weaver, being well known in the community, his carpets and his wares being sought after by those from near and far. But he grew old. But he'd already trained his sons to be weavers, so they had a little community and very successful business going. But then the old man's wife died, and he fell into a deep depression and what could be called senility. And so, over time, it was felt by his sons and their wives that the old man was an embarrassment to them. He drooled. He wasn't coherent. He was forgetful. So, after much complaining by the wives who were taking care of him, the son said, "Do with him what you will." Now, of course, they did not want to just totally discard him. So it was decided to build a little hut for him down in the garden. And this they did, leaving him alone there, bringing his food to him at meal times. But he was left to wallow in the sadness of all the work he had done, all that he had achieved, and now he was left almost bereft. One day it so happened that a wandering sadhu, a wandering monk, came by and was invited into their house by the sons and treated quite royally. And after feeding hospitality, they invited him to stay the night, and he said, no, I do not like to sleep in beds. I prefer to be out in nature. So they took him out into their lush garden, found a place for him to rest comfortably for the night, and left him. But just as the sadhu was falling off to sleep, he heard mumbled sounds coming from somewhere. And so he said, "Who is that?" And a tremulous voice answered, "Why, it's me." And so the monk sought out where this voice was coming from and found the old man sitting alone. So together they passed a little time, and the old man told the monk of his situation, discarded like some piece of trash, no longer cared for except for the basic needs of life. "Oh," said the monk, "would you like me to teach you a sadhana, a way to turn inward away from the cares and woes of the world and life?" "Oh yes," tremulously said the old man. The next day, the sadhu, the monk, left, and our old weaver began assiduously to practice what it is that the monk had taught him, turning inward. And for 12 years he practiced this sadhana. It was found by his family that he no longer complained as he had done so before. In fact, they found that he had become totally silent. But one day there was a great celebration taking place in the main household because they'd sold a beautiful carpet for a great deal of money. So the wives of the sons had forgotten to take the evening meal to the old man, and hurriedly they gathered together the remains of the feast and took it down to the little hut in the garden. But when the door was opened, there, instead of being an old, decrepit, senile man, there was a youthful, vibrant, alive being, effulgent with light. They quickly ran back to the house and brought the sons, "Come, come." And the sons thought, "He's leaving his body, we have to go." But they too were astounded and astonished at the sight that greeted them when they entered the small hut. From that time on, people came, curiously at first, but more and more to bask in that which the old man had become. The force, the power. What is it for us? What is it we're discovering after our journey of having objects of love and desire? Having it become a deep, deep longing for something beyond those earthly indulgences, and perhaps now tasting the deep, deep and growing realization of what it is that's there when there is no longer desire or longing. What is it that we're discovering about this force, this